What happens when a harmless mistake on a work trip becomes the moment my husband stops arguing and starts preparing? Why did he come home early, silently gather evidence, and hand me papers in front of everyone? Can I still call him controlling when the truth lands in daylight? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Calder, and I swear I didn't plan for my whole life to fall apart over one work trip. People keep acting like I threw my marriage away on purpose, like I woke up that morning thinking, yes, today I will ruin everything. It wasn't like that. At least, that's what I keep telling myself. I was tired, stressed, and honestly, just desperate to feel noticed for once. So when Rowan looked at me like I mattered, I let myself believe it was harmless, a moment, a break, something I deserved. But the real shock didn't come from what happened that night. It came from Elias, my quiet, steady husband, showing up at the airport early with that calm face that told me he already knew something was wrong. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He didn't even ask questions. He just watched me. And that silence felt heavier than any fight we'd ever had. Back then, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I understand he was planning. I didn't realize a single night could pull apart a whole life until the day he handed me divorce papers in public. And I still can't decide whether he overreacted or finally woke up. I should have known the work trip would become a problem the moment I saw the hotel lobby. Everything looked too clean, too polished, too far from my normal life with Elias. The tall glass doors spun behind me while my co-workers dragged their suitcases across the shiny floor, laughing like this was some kind of vacation. I told myself it was just another assignment, but deep down, I liked the idea of being away from home, away from the quiet heaviness that had been growing between Elias and me. The conference center took up half the building. Bright banners hung from the ceiling with words like innovation and team performance. I checked in, took my badge, and rode the elevator up to my floor. My room wasn't even that nice, but it felt like freedom. No shoes by the door, no quiet sighs from the hallway, no reminders that I was supposed to be the stable one. During the day, meetings dragged on. Charts, budgets, rehearsed smiles. People asked me questions I didn't care about. But every time Rowan spoke, the room shifted. He wasn't even that handsome, but he had this easy way of talking, like he'd known everyone for years. He made people laugh without trying. When he sat next to me, he smelled like cedar and some kind of expensive soap. He asked how long I'd been with the company, and I told him. He said I seemed like someone who held everything together. I almost laughed. Elias used to say that. Before he got too serious, too tired, too careful. At lunch, Rowan walked with our group to the food court. He told a story about a customer calling the wrong branch for weeks and said everyone wanted him to fix it. People laughed. I laughed too. It felt good to laugh around someone who wasn't judging me for being tired all the time. He brushed my arm once when the group squeezed together to let someone pass. I didn't move away. I didn't think about it. Or maybe I did. That evening, the company hosted a mixer on the rooftop bar. The city light stretched out like a stage below us. Everyone ordered drinks even though we had meetings early the next morning. Music played just loud enough to block quiet thoughts. I remember leaning on the railing, feeling the warm air on my skin, thinking that I looked different in this light. Not a wife, not a mother, just someone who wanted a moment to breathe. Rowan showed up with 2 drinks in hand. He said he guessed what I liked. I took it without asking how he knew. Maybe it was luck. Maybe he was paying more attention to me than anyone at home had in months. He asked if I was enjoying the trip. I said it was fine. He said I deserved something better than fine. I didn't know how to answer that, so I took a sip and looked at the skyline like it held a secret. Around us, Co-workers snapped photos and posted them. Someone called out my name and said I looked alive for once. They laughed. I laughed too, but my cheeks felt hot. I told myself they were joking, but part of me believed it. I hadn't felt alive in so long. At home, everything felt like a chore, even smiling, even breathing. When the wind picked up, I realized I'd forgotten to text Elias. He had sent a message asking how the trip was going. I typed good, busy, and sent it. He replied with a thumbs up. That was it. A thumbs up. I told myself it wasn't enough, that he should have called, should have asked more. I used that tiny moment to explain to myself why the night kept moving the way it did. People started leaving. The bar thinned out. My manager went downstairs to prepare for tomorrow. Rowan stayed. He leaned on the railing beside me and talked about how he hated his apartment because it felt cold. I said mine felt too quiet sometimes. He asked if quiet made me lonely. I didn't answer. He smiled like he already knew. When he asked if I wanted to check out the lounge on his floor, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Just two co-workers exploring the hotel. People did it all the time. We walked through the hallways, listening to our footsteps echo. The lounge was empty except for a vending machine humming in the corner. We sat on a couch that sagged in the middle. He joked about the hotel needing better furniture. I said maybe they spent all the money on the lobby. There was a moment when everything paused. I should have stood up. I should have gone back to my room. But the air felt warm and close. Rowan looked at me like he was waiting for permission. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just didn't move. That was enough. Afterward, I walked back to my room alone, my hands shaking, even though I kept telling myself nothing had happened that couldn't be forgotten. People made mistakes. People needed breaks. I convinced myself I'd pushed the limits, but hadn't crossed anything serious. A story I could control if I needed to. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a missed call from Elias. Then another. The guilt hit me first, sharp and fast, but I shoved it down. I told myself he was probably calling about something small, like reminding me to pack snacks for the kids' lunches next week. Something routine, something dull. I set my phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, trying to steady my breathing. I thought I would fall asleep quickly, but I didn't. I kept replaying the rooftop lights, Rowan's laugh, the way the hotel air smelled like citrus. I kept telling myself it meant nothing, that tomorrow I'd be normal again. But just when I closed my eyes, the screen lit up with a new message from Elias. 3 words that made my chest tighten. I'm coming home. When I got off the plane, the first thing I saw was Elias standing by the arrivals railing with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be at work, or at home, or anywhere except here waiting for me, with that unreadable expression that made the air around him feel colder than the rest of the airport. I tried to smile, tried to look surprised in a sweet way, but it felt stiff. He didn't wave. He didn't step forward. He just nodded once like I was a colleague he barely knew. I walked toward him, dragging my suitcase behind me. People rushed past, families hugging, couples kissing, friends yelling each other's names. We just stood there in the middle of it all, staring at each other like 2 strangers who didn't know if they were supposed to speak. I asked why he came. He said he finished work early. I asked why he didn't tell me. He said he didn't think he needed to. His calm voice made me feel small, like I had done something without knowing what it was. He reached for my suitcase without asking, and I let him take it, because I didn't know what else to do. As we walked to the parking garage, I kept talking to fill the silence. I told him the trip was fine, the meetings productive, the hotel a little old. He gave short responses, just enough to show he was listening, but not enough to comfort me. I asked about the kids. He said they were with his mother and everything was fine. He said, fine, the same way I said it when I didn't want to talk. Inside the car, the air felt heavy. He drove like normal, not fast or slow, not angry or relaxed, just focused. I wanted him to ask questions so I could control the answers, but he didn't. He kept his eyes on the road the whole time. I tried joking about the airport coffee being terrible. He said he hadn't had any. I tried telling him I missed him. He said he knew. That was all. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed the trash bin was already brought in. The porch light had been replaced. Small things he usually did on weekends, not midweek. It made my stomach twist. Inside the house, everything looked too neat. The kids' shoes were lined up. The counters were clean. The guest room door was cracked open, as if someone had been in there recently. I asked if something happened while I was gone. He said no, everything was normal. I unpacked slowly in the bedroom while Elias changed out of his work clothes. He didn't come over to hug me or ask about my day. He just moved around the room with this quiet efficiency, picking up laundry, folding a blanket, adjusting the blinds. I tried to sit on the bed and check my phone, but the memory of Rowan's messages made my hands shake. I deleted the whole thread without thinking. I could hear the shower running in the bathroom, steady and calm, while I sat there erasing evidence like it was just another chore. That night we had dinner with the kids at my mother-in-law's house. Elias said we should all eat together since I'd been gone. Ruth greeted me politely, but her eyes lingered on me longer than usual, like she was looking for something she couldn't name. The kids hugged me tight, happy I was home. I held on to them a little too long, desperate for someone to feel warm toward me. At the table, I told a few stories about the trip. Safe ones, nothing exciting, nothing with hotel bars or cedar-scented soap. Ruth asked if it was stressful. I said a little. She asked if the team was good. I said yes. She asked who I spent most of the time with. I hesitated for half a breath, then said I was mostly alone. Elias didn't look up from his plate, but I knew he heard the pause. When the kids went to the living room, Ruth asked if Elias seemed tired lately. I said he was always tired. She nodded and said she hoped things were peaceful at home. I told her everything was fine, even though that word was starting to feel like a lie against my tongue. Elias drove us home in silence. When we got inside, he went straight to the guest room and returned with 2 pillows. He set them on the couch and said he was sleeping there tonight because he had work early. I asked if something was wrong. He said no. I said he didn't have to. He said it was easier this way. My sister called right after he shut the lights in the living room. She asked how the trip was. I told her it was good. She asked if Elias was being dramatic again. I said he was acting strange, like he knew something but wouldn't say it. She told me not to worry, that men always overreact when women get a little attention. I laughed, even though it wasn't funny. Later, I walked into the living room to check on him. He was lying on his side, eyes open but pretending to be asleep. The glow from his phone screen lit the edge of the couch. I asked if he wanted to talk. He said not right now. I said I felt like he was upset with me. He didn't answer. When I went back to the bedroom, I noticed his phone sitting on the dresser, charging. A calendar alert flashed across the screen for a moment, before it dimmed. Downtown, 3:40 p.m. Elias never kept strict schedules like that. He barely used calendar reminders at all. My heart thudded once, hard. I tried to unlock the phone, but it asked for a passcode I didn't know. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to come to bed. But he never did. Every creak in the house felt like proof of something I couldn't see. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that Elias just needed a night to cool off, that tomorrow he'd act normal and I could settle back into my routine. But the next morning, he woke before dawn and left without a sound. When I went into the kitchen, 2 mugs sat on the counter, his washed and dried neatly on one corner, mine still half full on the other, like 2 separate worlds pretending to share space. The next morning at work felt strange, like the whole office had shifted while I was gone. People greeted me with polite smiles, but some of them watched me a second too long, as if they were waiting for me to reveal something. I told myself it was all in my head. I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and pretended everything was normal. The problem was, nothing felt normal anymore. About an hour into the morning, my coworker Mara stopped by holding her coffee. She said welcome back in that drawn-out tone people use when they already know gossip. I asked what I missed. She shrugged and said only that people talk. I asked who. She just said the rooftop bar had been lively and walked away without explaining. My stomach clenched. I remembered laughing too loud, leaning a little too close to Rowan, taking the drink he handed me. I wondered who saw us and what angle they had posted. I told myself the clips probably looked harmless. Rowan didn't come by my desk. Usually he made some joke about morning meetings or asked if I'd survived another spreadsheet marathon. But that day, he kept his eyes down, talking only to our manager when necessary. Once, I caught him looking toward me from the break room, but when our eyes met, he turned away fast, like he'd touched something hot. I told myself he was just trying to be professional. Still, the distance unsettled me. During lunch, a few coworkers invited me to join them at a sandwich shop. I went because staying at my desk made me feel watched. At the table, the conversation bounced around until someone brought up the trip. They laughed about the rooftop photos and said everyone looked extra friendly. I tried to keep my tone light as I said we were all just tired and blowing off steam. Someone asked if I spent most of the night talking to Rowan. I said he was part of the group. They nodded too quickly. I hated how they looked at each other afterward. When I got back to the office, I checked my phone. Elias hadn't sent anything except a single text saying he picked the kids up from school and they were doing homework. He didn't ask about my day. He didn't say he missed me. I could feel myself getting annoyed, even though I knew I had no right. I told myself he was punishing me by being distant. I told myself I deserved better than silence. That afternoon, our team gathered for a project meeting. Rowan sat 2 chairs away and didn't speak unless spoken to. At one point, when the manager asked me to share an update, I felt the weight of everyone's attention pressing on me. Their eyes flicked between Rowan and me like a silent question. I gave my report quickly, pretending nothing felt off. When the meeting ended, Rowan walked out before I even stood up. Later, while I was gathering my things, Mara stopped by again. She lowered her voice and said she wasn't trying to stir anything, but thought I should know a junior staffer had mentioned seeing me and Rowan on the rooftop looking cozy. I said that wasn't true. She held up her hands and said she didn't care either way, but suggested I stay aware of how things looked. Her tone made me want to scream. I thanked her instead. When I left work, I checked my phone again. No new message from Elias. I drove straight to the family restaurant where Ruth had invited us for dinner. The kids were sitting in the side booth, coloring the kids' menus. Ruth looked tired but greeted me with a warm enough smile. Elias arrived a few minutes later, apologizing for being late. He sat across from me without touching my hand, or even brushing against me as he slid into the booth. It felt like he was keeping an invisible line between us. While we waited for food, I tried making conversation. I asked about his day. He said it was fine. I asked if he slept well. He said he did. I asked if he needed help with anything for tomorrow. He said no. Every answer felt short, clipped, measured. Ruth watched us carefully. At one point, she asked if everything was all right. I said yes, just busy. Elias didn't correct me, didn't add anything, just folded his napkin neatly, like he was building a barrier. The kids tried to lighten the mood. They told silly stories about school, and I laughed at the right moments, but my chest felt tight. I kept glancing at Elias, hoping he'd look at me with some emotion, any emotion, but he just nodded at the kids' stories and asked them gentle questions, the way he always did. After dinner, he stepped outside to take a call. I watched him through the window, standing under the yellow street lamp with his back to me. He held the phone close, speaking in quiet tones. When he hung up, he didn't come back inside right away. He took another breath first, like he was centering himself. On the ride home, I tried again. I asked if something was wrong. He said no, he was just thinking. I asked what about. He said everything. The way he said it scared me more than if he'd yelled. When we got home, he helped the kids get ready for bed while I cleaned up the dishes. I listened from the hallway as he told them a story, in that calm voice they loved so much. I remembered when that voice used to make me feel safe too. After the kids were asleep, Elias went to the bedroom and took off his glasses. I leaned against the door frame and told him he'd been quiet all day. He said he didn't have much to say. I said it felt like he was shutting me out. He said he wasn't. He said he was just tired. I didn't believe him, but I didn't know how to push without sounding guilty. I told him people at work were starting rumors about the trip. He said okay. Not angry, not shocked, just okay. Like he already knew. I snapped then. I said I wished he'd actually talk to me. He said talking only helped when both people were honest. The words hit me hard. I tried to act offended, asked what he meant. He said nothing. I stepped closer and reached for his arm, but he stepped back like my touch surprised him. He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his forehead. I asked again what was going on, why he was acting like this. He said he didn't want to fight. I said I wasn't fighting, I was trying to fix things. He said I didn't even know what needed fixing. I told him he was being unfair. He said maybe. Before I could continue, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a message preview. Follow-up confirmed. My breath caught. He picked up the phone quickly, turned the screen away from me, and typed something before setting it down again. I asked what that was. He said, just a reminder. I said it didn't look like just a reminder. He said we didn't need to talk about it right now. I stood there feeling like the floor shifted under me. Something was happening and I wasn't in control of it. The thought made my skin crawl. I wanted to demand answers, but the calm in his eyes made me freeze. It was the kind of calm people have when they already know the outcome of a game the other person is still trying to play. He lay down without another word. I stayed by the door, staring, trying to decide if I should push harder or wait until morning. But he closed his eyes, ending the conversation without ending anything at all. I walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. It felt like the whole world had shifted, and no one had bothered to tell me. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but I knew what Janelle would say. I knew what Ruth would think. I didn't want to hear either of them. So instead, I stood there alone, trying to convince myself that tomorrow would be different, that the rumors would fade, that Elias's calm wouldn't mean anything serious. But deep down, something told me tomorrow was already too late. The next few days felt like walking through fog, the kind that sticks to your clothes and follows you everywhere. I wanted to shake it off, pretend nothing was wrong, but every time I looked at Elias, his quiet eyes told me something had shifted. He still made breakfast, still packed the kids' lunches, still wiped the counter after pouring his coffee. But he moved like someone who had learned to live around me instead of with me. Saturday morning, I suggested we all go to the community park. The kids needed fresh air, and I hoped a little sunshine might warm whatever wall Elias kept between us. He agreed without hesitation, which almost disappointed me. I wanted him to resist, to show some emotion, anything other than that calm. At the park, the kids ran toward the swings, laughing as they raced each other. I sat on the bench beside Elias, trying to enjoy the moment. He watched the children, arms crossed loosely, face unreadable. I asked if he wanted a coffee from the little kiosk. He said he was fine. I asked if work had been stressful. He said not more than usual. I asked if he was mad at me. He didn't answer right away. Then he said he didn't think mad was the right word. A cold wave washed over me. I pressed him to explain. He just shook his head slightly and said it wasn't the place. His calm made me feel reckless. I told him silence wasn't helping anything. He said talking wasn't either. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get defensive. He just sounded like he had already made up his mind about something I didn't understand. The kids called out for him to watch their trick on the monkey bars. He stood up and joined them. They clung to him, laughing, unaware of the tightness in his smile. I watched from the bench, feeling like an outsider in my own family. When the kids got tired, we walked to the parking lot. I tried to hold his hand. He moved his keys from one hand to the other and didn't take mine. I pretended not to notice. On the drive home, the kids fell asleep in the back seat. I saw Elias glance at them in the mirror with that soft look he always had for them. When his eyes returned to the road, the softness vanished. I asked him again what was wrong. He said he didn't want to talk in front of the kids. I said they were asleep. He said they could wake up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked out the window and told myself he was being dramatic, that he was punishing me, that if he cared, he'd fight. He always used to fight when something bothered him. Now he just let everything slide through his fingers like sand. At the supermarket parking lot, we stopped to pick up groceries. While he grabbed a cart, I tried again. I said I felt like he was avoiding me. He said he wasn't avoiding anything. I told him he was acting distant. He said distance was sometimes necessary. It felt like a knife disguised as a sentence. Inside the store, he walked with the kids, letting them choose snacks while I followed behind. He didn't rush them, didn't correct them, didn't tell them to put things back. He just let them fill the cart like it didn't matter. I asked if he really needed that much cereal. He said the kids liked variety. I said we couldn't waste food. He said we wouldn't. At checkout, he paid without looking at me. The cashier asked if we needed help to the car. Elias said no. The kids yawned and asked if we could get ice cream on the way home. Elias said yes. I said they already had enough sugar today. He said it was just one time. I bit my tongue. I didn't want to look like the nagging parent. When we got home, the kids ran inside. Elias carried the bags quietly. I followed him into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. I said we needed to talk. He said he knew. I said I didn't understand why he was acting like I'd done something unforgivable. He didn't look up as he stacked the bread on the counter. Then he said he wasn't sure what I considered unforgivable anymore. My heart stuttered. I asked what that meant. He said nothing else and put the eggs in the fridge. I felt the walls closing in. I told him he was twisting things, making problems out of nothing. He said he wished that were true. His calm voice made me feel like I was losing a debate I didn't know we were having. I reached for his arm, desperate for something solid. He stepped back again, just a few inches, but enough to make the distance feel permanent. I told him he couldn't treat me like a stranger in my own house. He said it wasn't his intention. I said it felt like it. He didn't deny it. The kids came in asking for ice cream, breaking the tension. Elias softened immediately, taking out the tubs and handing them spoons. I watched him while I leaned on the doorway. He looked natural with them, steady, patient. I used to love that about him. Now it felt like proof he didn't need me at all. That evening, I tried calling my sister. She didn't pick up. I stared at my phone, wondering if she was tired of hearing me complain. I didn't have anyone else to call, not without making myself look guilty. Instead, I opened social media and scrolled mindlessly until my eyes blurred. Sometime after 9, I heard movement in the hallway. The neighbor across from us stepped out of her apartment holding a bag of trash. She smiled when she saw me. She said she'd seen Elias leaving early that morning with some kind of bag and a few folders. She asked if everything was okay. I forced a smile and said yes, he was just preparing for a busy week. She nodded politely, but something in her eyes told me she didn't believe me. People never say what they're really thinking. When I went back inside, Elias was in the living room sorting mail. Bills, school flyers, a couple of coupons. Normal things. He asked if I'd remembered to sign the permission slip for Joa's field trip. I said I would do it. He nodded and kept placing things into neat piles. On the coffee table, I noticed something out of place, a USB drive resting under a folder labeled Taxes. Elias never left things lying around. I asked what it was. He said just files he needed to look at later. I asked if he started saving documents again. He said he liked being organized. He said it simply, not defensively. I didn't know how to respond. Before bed, he told the kids good night, tucked each of them in, kissed their foreheads. When he came into our bedroom, he didn't change into pajamas. He just stood near the dresser, then said he might sleep in the guest room again. I asked why. He said he didn't want to keep me awake with his tossing and turning. I said he didn't toss and turn. He said maybe he would tonight. I lay in the dark long after he left the room. The silence felt alive, like it was crawling up the walls. I kept telling myself it was all temporary, that this was just a rough patch, that Elias would calm down and return to normal. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that USB drive under the taxes folder. I saw the neighbor's curious look. I saw the way he stepped back when I reached for him. For the first time, a small voice inside me whispered something I refused to repeat. Elias wasn't avoiding conflict. He was preparing for something. The next morning, I woke with the sharp feeling that something had ended overnight, even though nothing obvious had happened. Elias had left before sunrise again. His side of the bed was smooth, almost cold. On the kitchen counter, he'd left a note reminding me about the kids' dentist appointments next week. No greeting, no signature, just the information, written in his neat handwriting. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to figure out what message he thought he was sending. I told myself I was done waiting for him to snap out of this strange mood. If he wasn't going to start the conversation, then I would. At work, I spent most of the morning rehearsing what I'd say. Something honest, but not too honest. Something that would make him soften, or at least finally talk. A big apology speech always worked in the past. I knew how to sound vulnerable enough to make him feel sorry for me, but strong enough that he couldn't accuse me of anything. It was a fine balance, but I'd done it before. That afternoon, I texted him asking if we could meet at a cafe near his office. He responded with a simple, "Okay," nothing else. No warmth, no suggestion of better timing. Just acceptance, like he was agreeing to a scheduled interview instead of meeting his wife. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with his hands wrapped around a plain black coffee. He looked tired but steady, like someone who had been preparing for this moment in a way I hadn't. I put my purse down and sat across from him, trying to smile. He nodded politely, the kind of nod you'd give a neighbor you barely knew. I began with something soft. I said I knew things had felt tense, and I wanted to understand what was going on. He said he appreciated that. His calm made me stumble. I expected pushback, frustration, anything I could push against. Instead, he was giving me nothing. So I leaned into it. I told him I'd been stressed, overwhelmed, worn out by work. I said the trip had been harder than I expected. I said I missed him. I waited for him to look moved, or at least conflicted, but he just listened, nodding occasionally, his eyes steady and unreadable. Then I tried the honest but not really honest part. I said I felt like we'd been slipping, that I wanted to rebuild things. I said I might have made mistakes in how I handled my stress, but that he wasn't blameless either. I reminded him how distant he'd been before the trip, how I felt alone, how I thought he didn't see me anymore. I said I needed him to meet me halfway. He sat there completely still. No reaction, no flash of guilt or anger, just quiet. Finally, he asked me what I meant by mistakes. His voice didn't shake, his eyes didn't narrow. He just asked the question like it was a line on a form he needed filled out. My throat tightened. I said I meant emotional mistakes, impatience, miscommunication, that sort of thing. I didn't say anything real. Why would I? The truth would only create problems. He nodded once. Then he asked what exactly I wanted from him right now. His tone wasn't cold. It was controlled, neutral. I said I wanted a chance to fix us. I wanted him to stop shutting me out. I wanted him to stop acting like I'd done something awful. He leaned back slightly, studying me for a long moment. Then he said he hadn't shut me out. He'd simply stepped back to see what was actually happening. I hated how calm he was. I hated how there was no emotion for me to twist. I said stepping back wasn't helping either of us. He said it was helping him. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I said we couldn't keep going like this. He agreed. That scared me more than anything else. When I asked what that meant, he took a slow breath, placed his hands flat on the table and said, "I'll handle this properly." The sentence landed like a door closing. I asked what that was supposed to mean. He said it wasn't the place to talk about details. I said he was being cryptic. He said no, just clear. Before I could press him further, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then stood up and said he had to get back to work. He didn't touch my shoulder, didn't kiss my forehead, didn't even linger. He just walked out with the same steady stride he'd had all week, like the conversation had confirmed something for him instead of solving anything. I sat there for a few minutes, holding my lukewarm tea. People around me chatted and laughed, like the world hadn't just shifted beneath my feet. I tried to convince myself I still had control, that his calm was nothing more than pride or a bad mood stretched too far, but a small, sharp fear settled into my stomach and stayed there. That night, I tried again at home. I started with something soft, asking about the kids' day. He answered with the basic facts, homework, snacks, chores, but nothing extra. No stories, no warmth. After the kids went to their rooms, I cornered him in the hallway and told him we needed clarity. He said clarity was coming. I hated the way he said it, like he had already decided something while I was still scrambling to hold the pieces in place. I followed him into the living room and told him I deserved to know what he was planning. He said I would. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't even sound tired. He sounded resolved. That scared me more than any anger would have. I tried to touch his arm again. This time, he stepped back before I even reached him. He said space was better right now. I told him space wasn't a solution. He said it was the only thing keeping things civil. My stomach twisted. I asked if he thought I was the problem. He said he thought the truth would come out soon enough. Later, while brushing my teeth, I noticed his laptop bag by the door, zipped and ready. He hadn't done that in years. He usually tossed things together in the morning. I checked the guest room too. The blankets were folded neatly, the pillow scented, the air faintly smelling of laundry detergent. He'd been sleeping there for days, but it looked untouched, like he wanted it to stay presentable. On the dresser in our bedroom, I found another small thing. A single key on his keyring that hadn't been there before. Shiny, new. I didn't know what it was for, and he didn't offer an explanation. At bedtime, he told the kids good night and turned off the hallway lights. He walked past me without touching me, without even slowing down. I told myself he was just being dramatic, but I knew better. Dramatic people shout, slam doors, cry. Elias was calm, too calm. I crawled into bed alone, staring at the ceiling until the dark turned to grey. I replayed every word from the cafe, the quiet conviction in his voice, the way he said properly, like it was a verdict. For the first time, I felt something new. Not guilt, not grief, fear. I found out where Elias had really been going on those early mornings, the day everything finally snapped into place. Not through a conversation, not through a fight, but through a location pin he didn't mean to leave visible on the family tablet. I wasn't even supposed to see it. I'd opened the device to check a school notice, but the map app was still active. A small blue dot pulsed near the courthouse downtown. The same courthouse he'd written in those quiet calendar reminders. The same place he'd said we didn't need to talk about yet. My throat tightened, the kind of tightening that makes breathing feel optional. I told myself it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he was helping someone with paperwork. Maybe he had a jury duty summons. Maybe anything else. But the dread felt sharper than denial could dull. That afternoon, He texted and asked if I could meet him in the courthouse lobby to discuss next steps. That was the exact phrase. Next steps. Clean, formal, empty. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed, then lit up again. I typed back okay because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were shaking too much for anything longer. The kids were at Ruth's house, painting little clay animals for a school project. She said they were welcome to stay the whole evening. Her tone was warm but heavy, like she already knew something and didn't want to say it. I drove to the courthouse in a fog, barely remembering the turns. The building rose above the plaza like something carved from cold stone, and stricter rules. People walked in and out holding folders and envelopes, talking in hushed voices, wearing expressions that didn't belong to any ordinary day. I hated being one of them, even if I told myself I wasn't. I was just meeting my husband. That's all. Inside, the lobby ceiling stretched high, making every sound echo: a cough, a shoe scuff, a printer humming from behind a frosted window. Elias stood near a bench, hands folded loosely, his face unreadable. He wasn't nervous, he wasn't angry, he wasn't anything. He looked like someone who had already done all the hard parts before I arrived. When he saw me, he nodded once, the same small nod he gave me at the airport when everything first began to crumble. I walked toward him, trying to smile, trying to pretend this was still a simple conversation. But my lips wouldn't cooperate. I said we could talk somewhere else, maybe outside or in the car. He said here was fine. His voice didn't echo the way mine did. His voice stayed steady. Before I could ask what next steps meant, a woman in a dark blazer approached us. She held a clipboard and an envelope. She asked my name. I said it, confused. She confirmed it, checked something on her paper, then handed me the envelope without ceremony. She said, "You've been served," in a tone so neutral it barely counted as speech. My hand closed around the envelope automatically. It felt heavier than paper should feel. I stared at her, hoping she'd made a mistake, but she was already turning away, walking toward the elevator like I was just another name checked off her list. I looked at Elias. He didn't look away. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look victorious. He looked resolved. I asked him what this was. The words came out thin. He told me it was a divorce petition with temporary orders attached, financial disclosures, custody arrangements, and a request for a structured parenting plan. All lawful, all already filed, all ready to begin today. My heartbeat pulsed in my ears so loud I barely heard the last part. I said he didn't have to do this. He said he did. I said we could fix things. He said we couldn't. I said he never gave me a chance. He said he gave me more chances than I ever noticed. I told him he was overreacting. He said this wasn't a reaction. It was a decision. I said people made mistakes. He said mistakes were accidents, but choices had consequences. The words stung more because he didn't raise his voice. Not once. He didn't make a scene. He didn't try to embarrass me. If anything, I was the one breathing hard enough for people nearby to glance over. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. The top page had my full name in bold letters above a single word: respondent. I felt something hot rise behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down. Crying here would only make me look cornered, and I refused to give anyone that image. I asked him when he'd decided this. He said quietly that it wasn't one moment, it was all the moments I thought didn't count. The nights he slept in the guest room, the early mornings, the notes, the reminders, the silence. All of it had been preparation. He said he wasn't doing this to punish me. He was doing it because the truth mattered and the kids deserved stability. I told him they had stability. He shook his head with a calm finality that made my stomach twist. People were walking around us, some glancing, some ignoring, but the world felt wrapped in cotton. I said we could talk later, at home, away from all this. He said there wouldn't be a later in the way I meant. I tried to reach for him, maybe out of habit, maybe out of desperation, but he stepped back just enough that I couldn't pretend it was accidental. He told me he'd pick up the kids after school tomorrow and that he'd text me the schedule adjustments once they were approved. His tone stayed level, respectful, almost gentle, which made everything inside me collapse a little more. I said his name once, not sure what I expected to follow it. He said goodbye, not angrily, not softly, just, finally. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, leaving me standing in the middle of the lobby with an open envelope in my hand, and my whole life rearranged on a stack of legal pages I never thought would have my name on them. I didn't call after him. I didn't run after him. I just stood there, staring at my name above that single word, while the door closed behind him and the echo of it followed me into the silence,